You can't really fix what you can't see. I've seen things like in production where, accuracy would drop from like 95% to 60%, and it would just go unnoticed for weeks. That's usually the first thing that breaks. Another one is probably a big one, which is drift. Usually is another thing that breaks, where you may have a model that, the world is changing so fast, but the model is trained for, 2019, and you're trying to predict things or make decisions for 2020. So that obviously breaks.
Trust basically prevents existential risk of the organization. Compliance will prevent regulatory exposure, but that's one aspect of it. Whereas like the trust, this is a very important thing to understand. It really prevents existential risk, which is the most important factor than just a regulatory exposure.
We see right now a culture of move fast and break things.
You notice a lot of companies want to reward like the time to actually get a demo or to get an MVP, but they don't really reward like the time to trust, right? A working prototype usually gets like a budget approval right away. When you go to production, we tend to like measure for like speed and feature and like cost saving, but not really like measure like resilience or time recovery. The biggest challenge is usually like the executive turnover. They come in and ask questions and make you doubt everything you've done.
Speed, it's very measurable for an organization. It's easily fundable and it's immediately rewarded from a career standpoint. So capital and career incentives are more tuned towards velocity than resilience. For most organizations, integrity is a checklist. They don't really see that as an operating capability. And because of diffused accountability as well, the speed takes priority over integrity, because integrity means you have to touch a lot of decision points or business functions, whereas speed, I can probably move fast without necessarily having to touch all those functions to the degree that I need to. That's where decision ownership breaks. And that's why like speed is always prioritized.
The trust gap in enterprise AI isn't usually or typically about the model itself. So if that is the case, then what's the real source of the trust gap?
And then trust is going to be built over time. But you should always have like a kill switch.
This is the Secure CyberConnect podcast with Jay Adamson, Warren Atkinson, and our special co-host Chiru Bhavansikar, where we're joined by information, cybersecurity technology, and talent acquisition professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives, and offer advice and guidance. In the 2026 AI landscape, speed is common, but integrity is rare. And on this inaugural episode of the Integrity First AI series, we're joined by Sam Sawalhi, the CEO of JSOC IT, and of course Chiru Bhavansikar, the Chief AI Operating Officer of Agentic, who are joining forces to deconstruct the trust gap within enterprise AI. We aren't just talking about ethics, we're going to be talking about actualizing success through precision architecture. And our topics on this episode will be Integrity First AI, Precision Architecture for Real-World Trust. Sam has successfully led teams operating high-stakes systems throughout his career across cybersecurity, infrastructure, and regulated environments, where he understands that failure has real consequences. His perspective on AI has always been very much grounded in execution, and that applies to designing systems that hold up under pressure, not just in theory. He recognises that one of the most overlooked challenges in enterprise AI is that trust breaks operationally, not ethically, at handoffs between data, modelling and workflows, and of course, human decision-making. He feels that audiences can often address these issues by treating AI very much like critical infrastructure, with clear ownership, scoped autonomy, real-time observability, and defined failure and rollback paths. Chiru is a warm welcome back and a highly respected technology leader, recognised as one of the most impactful Chief AI Officers of 2024 by AIM Research. With over 2 decades of experience, he's been instrumental in conceptualising, strategising and commercialising cloud, data and AI solutions, and works on helping enterprise move across from AI experiments to trusted autonomous systems without sacrificing governance, control or accountability. He's responsible for pioneering Australia's very first cloud computing platform, developed Deloitte's AI financial forecasting platform, and played a key role in the creation of Cloudera Director. His considerable achievements include receiving the President's Award from Michael Dell and the Value for Client Recognition Award from Deloitte, Canada's CEO. Additionally, he's provided strategic consultation to Google on both data governance and partner management strategies. Chiru, Sam, welcome to the Secure Cyber Connect podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So, guys, we'll maybe just kick off with you, Chiru. If you could maybe give us a very brief, high-level overview on some of the key themes we'll explore today on the episode.
Yeah, our objective is to really focus on what we have been hearing in the industry, and especially from the leaders and the executives and the board members, like chief operating officers, chief executives, chief data officers, chief AI officers, chief digital officers. They all have some concerns when it comes to operationalizing AI. Our objective is to basically focus on those themes that resonate for them. The concerns that they have in their mind, to bring those and surface those out and address those concerns. And those themes that we are going to focus on are speed versus integrity, the trust gap, Demo-Ware versus production readiness, special operations mindset, autonomy and accountability. We believe these are some of the significant factors that shape the future of enterprise AI. And we intend to address those things on our podcast today.
Good stuff. Looking forward to getting into it. And Sam, we always ask our guests on the pod a bit of an icebreaker. If you could maybe describe a particular challenge or event that you faced in your career or throughout your life that maybe specifically shaped your views on cybersecurity.
Sure. It wasn't this actually, and I'll add a personal story for this one just to help land it. But yeah, I think the biggest security vulnerabilities are not usually technical. They're usually organizational. So I'll give you some of the challenges that we had that helped shape my view on cybersecurity. Is that usually with executive turnover, a new executive would come in and they would question everything that you had built. And that's fair. That's usually they're obviously accountable for results. But the challenge is really not having to defend your architecture or what we've built. It's really just rebuilding trust. And I think that's they come in, they think it's the entire system is broken. So what we've done actually to overcome that is we became very radical about transparency. We documented every decision, every why, and even we were even open about where we could have done better, not to really undermine ourselves, but just to kind of show that we're honest brokers. And I think that security is about trust. And then, trust requires transparency, and you really need both to actually operate. So that's kind of, that's probably, I would say, the biggest challenge is usually the executive turnover, where they come in and ask questions and, make you doubt everything you've done. So.
No, I appreciate that. And look, let's set the scene. We see right now a culture of move fast and break things. Certainly, with the advent of AI and organizations really leveraging that to get out of the blocks, it's more so than we've seen in 2022 to 2023. So you'll start with yourself, Chiru. Why is speed so common in AI, but integrity under pressure is rare?
So speed, it's very measurable for an organization. It's easily fundable, and it's immediately rewarded from a career standpoint. So capital and career incentives are more tuned towards velocity than resilience. For most organizations, integrity is a checklist. They don't really see that as an operating capability. And because of diffused accountability as well, the speed takes priority over integrity, because integrity means you have to touch a lot of decision points or business functions, whereas speed, I can probably move fast without necessarily having to touch all those functions to the degree that I need to. That's where decision ownership breaks. And that's why like speed is always prioritized over like integrity. Sam, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really like or enjoy saying this, but it's definitely like speed. Obviously, it's common, but it's not really like a technology problem. It's more of like it is an incentive problem. Like you know, like if you notice, a lot of companies want to reward like the time to actually get a demo or to get like an MVP, but like they don't really reward like the time to trust, right? So like it usually like a working prototype usually gets like a budget approval right away, but then if when you go to production, like a system ready, that like it always gets questioned about like cost, and it gets questioned about so yeah, we tend to like measure for like speed and feature and like cost saving, but not really like measure like resilience or time recovery or like recovery time. So I think it's definitely like it's a leadership problem, is not like really an engineering one. But yeah.
And from your experience, Sam, if it isn't a technology problem and it's in the combination of it being an incentive and of course leadership problem, what generally breaks first in the real world?
It's usually observability, basically, like just what you can't really fix what you can't see. So I think usually most AI systems are like block boxes at runtime. Like I've seen things like in production where accuracy would drop from like 95% to 60%, and it would just go unnoticed for weeks. And it's because that's usually the first thing that breaks. Another one is probably a big one, which is drift. Usually is another thing that breaks, where you may have a model that, the world is changing so fast, but the model is trained for, 2019, and you're trying to predict things or make decisions for 2020. So that obviously breaks. And then I think the biggest one is authority. Like when it comes to like when AI makes a bad decision, like who's going to own that, and who's going to override it. And that's usually like where I think like AI breaks, actually.
And briefly, what's the impact of that for organizations, from SME through to enterprise, for instance?
I mean, it's massive, because you could basically, like, you could be a loan officer that, you could, AI could make a decision based on bias, right? And that could be disastrous. So it is a major issue, actually.
No, definitely. We've seen organizations, for instance, they are anchoring in past models, 2019, 2020. We've even seen chatbots, for instance, be exploited and give out vouchers and discounts without them being trained. And of course, organizations are losing trust as well as revenue.
Yeah. I mean, you're also, keep in mind, like, you're introducing like a new attack surface, or you're expanding your attack surface. So that's also another thing that that needs to be, accounted for.
And we've touched on this a little bit already, but you've argued that the trust gap in enterprise AI isn't usually or typically about the model itself. So if that is the case, what's the real source of the trust gap? Yeah, and this is to you, Chiru, please.
Yeah. So if we really look at what a trust gap really means, a lot of the times people have this perception that trust literally means one of these things. It's either security, observability, compliance, and governance. But what the trust gap really is, it is not a single measure. It is like operational readiness and operational resilience across all these aspects. And I give this very simple example. When we go for, let's say, physical checkup, we get a lot of metrics. Those metrics say that, this is your cholesterol level, this is your blood sugar level, this is how your liver is functioning and the kidneys are functioning. But what ultimately me as an individual wants to know is like, what is my health profile like? Where do I stand in terms of the risk, from low risk to high risk? That's exactly what I want to know. So when we think about the trust gap, the emphasis goes into one of these individual aspects, without necessarily taking like an operational readiness or operational capability of enabling trust continuously across the enterprise. That's where the gap lives. It is almost like a health score of an enterprise, mobilization or operationalization of AI, rather than just one individual aspect alone. Not saying that those are not important, but that trust is horizontal across all those things. Okay, you can imagine it's a horizontal pillar that goes across these individual pillars of security, compliance, governance, observability.
Good comparison. And if that is the case, why do executives keep misdiagnosing that? Why do they keep getting it wrong? Why do they keep misdiagnosing this in focusing typically maybe on compliance instead of the actual operational trust?
Yeah, good question. So compliance is very familiar to enterprises. It's very bounded, it's very delegable. Like who owns a specific compliance. Compliance is very complete in nature. It's like there is an X protocol, and you adopt to the protocol, you get to that compliance level at that point in time. Whereas trust, which is very operational in nature, it is continuous. It's your enterprise's ability to manage trust over a period of time. And that's exactly like, I think Sam pointed out earlier. He said like there is a drift aspect of it. Compliance is looking at a point in time, whereas trust is a continuous factor over a period of time, how it manages the data drift, the model drift, and the process drift, which Sam alluded to earlier. So, and also like compliance can be outsourced easily. So you can get someone to actually take a look at compliance and say that, hey, here is the checkbox, it's done at that point of time, whereas trust is more internal in nature. Cannot easily outsource that because it's very process driven. And trust basically prevents existential risk of the organization. Compliance will prevent regulatory exposure, but that's one aspect of it. Whereas like the trust, this is a very important thing to understand. It really prevents existential risk, which is the most important factor than just a regulatory exposure.
It's familiar. Compliance is familiar, but it's not. Yeah,
exactly.
And look, we're engaged with a number of boards, individual contributors, senior leaders, and more often than not, me and Jay, we hear the challenge around weighing up to build internally or to buy. And of course, now there's a lot of vendors out there using AI irresponsibly, and they can't answer the basic questions when it comes to security or governance. And Sam, of course, for over 2 decades, you've been building high-stakes systems. So there is a big difference between a core demo and a savior. Can you explain the difference between precision architecture and demo-driven AI deployment?
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone knows that, all demos, especially like I've seen a lot of demos like AI demos, and they are usually like perfect, right? Like they work very well because they have like perfect data. They have, they're built around like happy paths. Only there's no arrow handling, there's no rollbacks, so it works perfectly. But then, precision architecture is like really the opposite of that. It's really designed to like fail safely, right? It's designed to adapt in messy environments. And that's what usually, like when you introduce AI or precision architecture, you are in this like messy reality and you have to solve for that. So I think I use this one analogy for demo like driven AI. It's basically like it's a show car, right? Like it looks amazing. You just can't drive it in the rain. And then like the precision architecture, it's more of like a special ops like vehicle. It's not pretty, but it will get you home when everything goes wrong. And that's kind of how we look at both, I would say the main differences between both.
I appreciate you sharing. And is there anything you want to add to that, Chiru?
No, I think Sam summed up really well.
That's brilliant. And Sam, what specific signals tell you immediately that an AI system wasn't built for production?
The first one, usually like when somebody says it works on my machine, that's usually that's like a red flag for us. But normally I normally tend to I was just in a meeting not too long ago, and it was a development team that wanted to build an AI internally. So we had some questions about, okay, they built an MVP. So some of the questions that we asked that we knew that they weren't really ready for production was, show us the logs for Tuesday at 2 a.m. If they can't really pull logs, that's a red flag. They're not ready for production, or they're not even ready for to go live. So which is a big issue. We ask, some of the red flags are usually around like API calls, right? And timeouts. If depending on their answers, if their answers are, no, it's not going to time out, we're basically done talking here. So that's everything eventually times out. So that's another one. I think usually, I think the biggest one for me is who really is going to own the outcome when this is wrong, right? And if their answer is that it's the data science team, that's usually incorrect, and that's a red flag. It's usually the business owners that own the business outcomes. And the biggest and final test is show us what your rollback plan looks like. And if they look confused, or if it's not ready, then that's a full stop. You're not ready for production.
That's brilliant. And Chiru, is there one red flag that perhaps you would look out for, or advise CISOs to look out for, perhaps?
Yeah, one red flag that I can really think of, in addition to what Sam mentioned, is I would ask, is integrity an afterthought, or have you been considering that as a part of your AI strategy? And if it is an afterthought, okay, let's move, build these agents fast, push it out, and then we'll think about all the other things. Then that's a massive red flag. It's very different. A lot of people think that AI is very similar to traditional software development. That's not the case. It has parallels, but in AI, in traditional software development, you build first, then you test, then you operationalize. In AI, you basically bring integrity and trust in parallel with your build itself, and then you literally operationalize after that.
There's a true shift to the left then from a security standpoint.
Yeah.
And staying on the special ops comment from earlier, the special ops mindset that we hear more and more now. Sam, you come from a background where failure has definitely had real consequences. And what does security or special ops discipline actually add to AI system design that maybe standard machine learning engineering would typically leave out?
Yeah, I come, as you mentioned earlier, if you obviously some of the people that work at JSOC come from big tech, similar to Chiru here as well. I worked for Netflix. If you look at Netflix Kiosk Monkey, for example, a lot of really standard machine learning engineering, usually it focuses and it optimizes for accuracy, where special ops, it looks at completing the mission and making sure that what can go wrong, or what if everything goes wrong, or when everything goes wrong. And it does both, right? Accuracy, and then in production AI, you really need both. So what special ops discipline looks like, it's actually making sure that you have a clear mission, right? You need to define what success looks like. You need acceptable failure upfront. You have to know what those are. And then you have to also rehearse for failure. A lot of companies rehearse for success, but not failure, which is another thing that, that's actually part of special ops discipline. And I also think, you definitely don't want to have like a single point of failure. You want to always have a full, like a, a failback, and also transparency. I think those are the main ones. And then probably operational discipline, like, so making sure that, you can't, you have to have a checklist. Like, you can't just work off of your memory, because under stress, you're not going to be like, that memory is not going to serve you well. So.
Understood. And Chiru, are there any sort of myths out there that surround this? Where are organizations, typically going wrong?
Yeah, so there are a lot of myths that come into this. Like, some typically, I think Sam and I, when we have conversations, we talk about this quite a lot. He actually mentions this. Vendors think, like businesses think that vendors manage risk. In actuality, like, it's the organization that is responsible for managing risk. Vendors support with the risk mitigation process, but it's actually business that owns the risk. And also there is this thought process that, hey, we did everything right. We put AI into production, and now there is no risk. That the aspect of continuous trust, operational trust, is completely ignored. And then there is also this point that monitoring is observability, and then, like, as long as I have this either monitoring or observability, I'm good enough. But that's observability of what is actually a question when it comes to AI. As like Sam pointed out, there are the attack surface is wider. So what exactly are you observing also matters there. Those are the myths that requires really attention.
So, talk a little bit more about, obviously, the governance side of things, and how that leans into the vendor trap. AI is being deployed faster than governance can keep up. We've known this for some time now. Are there specific risks that that are being created right now for enterprise-led businesses that isn't thinking about the ownership side of things? And that's to you, Chiru.
Yeah, I mean, the single biggest risk is unbounded liability that it creates. AI without ownership, it does not fail gradually. That's a perception. It actually fails suddenly and publicly, which is not only a reputational risk, it could be a regulatory risk, it could be a financial risk. It's like way more than that. So if the enterprise, if they cannot name who owns like AI systems decisions, its failure modes, its shutdown authority, governance has already fallen behind in a way that's it literally threatens the organization. So it's really important to give attention to governance when you're operationalizing AI systems.
We talk about vendors a lot on our podcast and the various issues with them, and I guess there is, as with AI, we're seeing a lot of reliance on the larger vendors to solve this trust. Where do you feel that over reliance on vendors is breaking down? We obviously can't just rely on Microsoft or OpenAI to handle the risk. So where do you feel there's more of an over reliance on these vendors as time goes by?
Yeah, great question. So, our team, we bring technology to manage operational trust and mitigate risks in the sphere of AI. Now, saying that, our also team comes from a wide variety of experience at Arhasi in working for some of the largest both tech and consulting enterprises. So when we engage with a client, when we showcase our technology, enterprises automatically assume that we are the holy grail of everything. Of course, we can help the enterprises, but it is important to understand that any vendor, whether it is Arhasi, Microsoft, OpenAI, anyone, they secure what is called as a platform, secure infrastructure. Ultimately, the risk profile stands on business about how they are going to manage. When we talk about trust, it is not just a feature that you can purchase out of the box. That's why it's important to establish operating discipline for the enterprise. So probably there is today an operating discipline for software applications. How do we extend that operating discipline? and extend it to AI is what like really makes a difference. So it's really, really important to understand that vendors can help, vendors can bring technology to manage risks better, vendors can provide like strategy to extend your operating discipline, but ultimately the risk profile is what is on the head of the enterprise. Anything you'd like to add here, Sam?
No, I think it's just maybe the misconception about vendors will actually they'll own integrity and safety, which is not like the case. But yeah, so the reliance on vendors and having that misconception is usually is something that most companies actually it's a misconception. So I think we need to pay more close attention to it.
To add to the growing list of misconceptions about that.
Yes.
And is there any other parts of risk that you feel could really never are sacrosanct from being outsourced? From an internal perspective, regardless of who the vendor is, what do they always have to own?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of clients are under the impression that the vendor knows the system, but they really don't. Like, they don't know your system, but they, so that's probably another risk where a lot of companies think that the vendor knows their system, and that's not usually the case.
And Chiru, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, if a risk materially affects your customers, regulators, or your reputation, it is definitely not outsourceable. Outsourceable help can be taken, but it is not outsourceable completely, no matter how trusted the vendor is.
And look, further to that, one of the hardest questions for most leaders to answer is, why is it hard to define where AI is going wrong within our business? And as you mentioned earlier, of course, identifying the ownership there is a challenge. So, Chiru, very briefly, how can organizations identify where that ownership should lay, and what things generally can go wrong?
Yeah, one of the challenges when it comes to artificial intelligence is, and especially autonomous AI, it's very cross-functional in nature. We are not talking about bots or like chatbots and things like that here. We are talking about really operationalizing AI to the degree that it can make a material impact. So because of the cross-functional nature, ownership resides across many functions. What that really means is this: if there is a problem with the AI in production, while it is actually serving the customer base or making critical decisions or XYZ, what we are really talking about is the risk profile, or the issue is not just the ownership of the data science team. I think Sam alluded to that earlier. It really spans across legal, spans across IT, spans across some business units. So there are a lot of hands that get touched through the process. So that's why it's really like challenging in terms of how to basically enforce control or the AI in that sense. What we are trying to really do is we are trying to bring control and determinism to something that naturally doesn't behave that way. It has enormous benefits. It's not impossible, but it's definitely doable with the right approach.
I appreciate you sharing. And Sam, let's set some boundaries. Where should AI never be autonomous, and are there any specific zones where the human loop must remain?
A few, actually. I think anywhere where you just cannot undo it. Like, for example, like data deletion, for example, should not be like basically contract signing, or like making config changes to like a production environment. I think also hiring, firing, like large financial decisions. I think the cost of being wrong is going to be massive if AI is leveraged there. I think medical diagnosis, I know that's like an evolving thing, but I think that, in my opinion, it should be fully autonomous. And then because I think judgment like really matters more than like data, and it's better just to, AI just doesn't really understand that. Humans like do much better in that. Yeah. So I think I believe in like earned autonomy, if that makes sense. Like AI should make recommendations, and then the human actually decides on what that, and then trust is going to be built over time. So, but you should always have like a kill switch.
Appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, of
and
course.
let's talk failures, recovery, and runtime integrity. Let's look at the systems live. What does integrity look like in an AI system at runtime? And is it just accuracy? Is it observability? Do you mind sharing your thoughts on this first, Chiru, and then followed by yourself, Sam?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they talk about runtime integrity, they usually jump straight to like accuracy, and I think it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. I think it's more like runtime integrity. It's basically like it's how the system behaves right now in production, and then like with real data. That's what like runtime integrity, and beyond accuracy, I think you need to look at like how it validates input, and how it like monitors like behaviors, and then obviously you want to log everything. You want to compare it to the baseline. So it's more than just accuracy.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Chiru?
Yeah, I mean, like Sam summed it up, like, it's more than accuracy alone. Like, a couple of things that come to my mind, which I was thinking now, was explainability. I mean, logging is auditability, provenance, bias mitigation. So some of the things like, the varied factors that come into play when we think about integrity here. So it's not just accuracy alone. And it's never been the case. Even in the traditional ML modeling, even almost 10 years ago, it was never about accuracy. It was always a factor that was balanced between like accuracy and precision, right? So, and now like AI is much more diverse in nature. So there are like multiple angles that need to be addressed.
Well, certainly. And Sam, when things go wrong, how should leaders plan for both AI failure and recovery? What does the rollback look like?
So I always say like that the rollback plan should be actually more detailed than the deployment plan. So that's because hope is like really, you can't hope that things will work the way you want them to work, because hope is not like a strategy. But so yeah, I think before deploying AI, if you can answer one question, like what did we do before AI? And that should be like your disaster recovery plan, basically. So version everything, feature flag, basically just have an automated like circuit breaker where it could just, you could use to roll back. So.
Yeah, on the defaults of a circuit breaker or a kill switch, for instance. True, when things, of course, go wrong, obviously speed matters for organizations. How fast can you stop and reverse the systems? Do we literally need that kill switch, for example, or is there a better way of doing things?
I mean, definitely needed. I think it's more than the kill switch. It's about how quickly you realize that there is a problem. And I remember, like Sam alluded that too, a lot of the times it takes about weeks when that something goes wrong in an operational scenario. Like people don't even realize there is an issue. Sometimes it even gets worse when the client actually notifies the enterprise saying that, hey, here there is a problem. So these are the things like, how fast you detect and how fast you mitigate or at least roll back is like something that definitely, must be considered.
And look, without getting into too much, appreciate your rollback, certainly a fail-safe for organizations. And many that I converse with, for instance, are hesitant because of the cost that's associated to it, especially if you're doing backups, I don't know, in real time, for instance, every 5 minutes. How would you address that if that was a concern from your prospective partner?
Do you mind actually repeating that question? Was it about backup, right?
Yeah, so the associated cost that comes with it, I know that's a concern for a lot of security and technology leaders. For instance, we spoke earlier in the week with a automated red teaming organization, and they've got a significant amount of contracts, but the data storage of that is coming significant for them. So for leaders that are concerned about increased cost of having that rollback option, for instance, what would you say to them to perhaps soften that blow?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're unable to test it, right, like you don't really have it, right? So I think, so if companies want to like have that ability to be able to roll back and look at, obviously the cost of downtime, right? Or, I think it's like, I know there are a lot of companies, and that's a very valid concern, and we come across it all the time where they look at the cost of, having something just in case if anything happens, like a disaster recovery, and like you have to sometimes justify it. But I think it's also like the cost of downtime, your reputation, and just like just basically like being able to get back to business. And I think those, like, if they're able to answer those questions and see the value in that, I think that's usually an easy answer, and it's usually justified.
I appreciate you sharing. And Chiru, is there perhaps a disaster you can share with our audience where your organization's perhaps gone extremely wrong in these instances?
AI makes decisions, and how do you make those decisions defensible? If I'm a CIO or a chief AI officer or CDO, and I put this AI to operational, into production, like, solving some of my business problems or streamlining my processes. Now, every decision that it makes, I should be able to defend because ownership relies on me. AI is making decisions. It's like, imagine this car, like, Waymo cars, like they are on the road, they are running like, really well without a driver. Like, what happens if the Waymo car hits someone? Like, who is accountable? Is it like Waymo? Because there is no driver to get a ticket. So similarly, the person who actually operationalizes it, the leader, is still responsible. So it's really important to make that those decisions are defensible. What that really means is, now you need to be able to trace back to every decision. How did AI make that decision? What data points did it leverage to make the decisions? Where did those data points actually come from? And how those data points were taken into consideration in making a decision. So there is a whole topic about context engines and like all these things nowadays, like metadata. These are all coming into, because this is becoming like a real problem. So it's really important to making AI decisions defensible. And sometimes someone asked me the other day, like, what do you guys really do at our Hussey? And I said, like, all we do is we bring operational trust and we make your AI decisions defensible. One simple elevator pitch. That's literally what it is.
That's brilliant. And Sam, very briefly, could you give our audience perhaps an outlandish prediction for 2026 when it comes to AI? And briefly after that, what are you hoping to see when it comes to AI throughout 2026 and beyond?
A prediction for AI. I mean, I think a lot of, we're going to see a lot of apps and, a lot of applications and go to production. They're going to have pretty much like a widened attack surface, which that needs to be addressed, because you could see now, like, even if anyone you speak to or with, like, they're all about, like, vibe coding something. They have the ideas. They think that it's ready for production if it behaves a certain way, and then then you have like sort of all this bad code and that will be compromised, or and I think that is, from a security standpoint, I think just having a standard around, like, does this actually meet like OWASP or best practices, or does it meet like the security standard before it can actually, so it should be pen tested. It should be we should be thorough when it comes to like using or putting sensitive data and things like that into those systems. So I think that's what we're going to see a lot of, just because of how fast you can go to market with an app and how fast you could build it. But I think over time it will get better, and I think we will start seeing a shift in like how developers pay attention to security, because now they have to design or develop with security in mind. So that's another thing that we will notice more of, I think.
And as we come to the sort of back end of the episode, just a couple of maybe questions that I think our listeners will certainly benefit from. You've talked about the mindset. I suppose we all know AI, is going to go wrong in some capacity. Other than hope is not a strategy, which Sam has kind of, which I think is a mantra for life, quite frankly, Sam. I suppose is there any sort of mental model, if you will, that maybe smaller companies specifically can use just to judge their AI readiness? And that's to Chiru and then Sam, if you'd be so kind.
From our standpoint, from where we operate at the data and the application level. So AI touches everything, like infrastructure to platform to data to ultimately the intelligence that sits on top of everything. So we the way we would look at it, the mental model is: are you really like looking at the every layer and where the risk profiles are? Okay, and what is your like strategy in place to look at this each layer? For example, like SOC 2 or WASP or something like that. Is it spanning across these layers? So that is like the kind of approach that we definitely recommend that everyone must consider.
I'll add something actually that it's basically like essentially what happens is, if you're able to fill the blanks to this question, like this system is allowed to be wrong when, and then like, if you could fill that, and then, and then also when this happens, like if you can answer those questions and fill those blanks, then you're, basically if you can't, like, then you're not ready for that. So that's kind of how we would think about it.
Sage advice. And from a board perspective, let's say I'm a board director, CEO, I'm looking at a proposal over the next week or so. What's the one question every board should be asking before approving AI projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think every board should ask, like, what happens if this system is wrong and who owns the outcome? If they can, if that's probably the first question and the question I would ask.
Yeah, so I think Sam is alluding to like decision ownership. From what I would probably also add to that is, do you have like an integrity first AI plan? It's not just an AI plan, it's an integrity first AI plan. That means that you have like a AI strategy that also takes into account the integrity aspect of it.
As long as the room feels uncomfortable when you ask that question, that's the right question.
Absolutely.
And look, to our audience, if you want a sort of a framework to work from, of course, be sure to like the show. That's across Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. I'm sure Chiru and Sam and the team have some resource to share with you, which of course we're going to put in the show notes.
And just finishing off, Sam, what does the future hold for JSOC? And where can our listeners go to connect with you?
Yeah, we have a few actually things that we can't really discuss at the moment, but we will keep everyone updated on jsocit.com. So if you go to jsocit.com, you'll see some updates. Our LinkedIn as well. And then also I could be reached at sam@jsocit.com.
Fantastic. Sounds exciting. And Chiru, what about yourself and Ahazi?
We are totally focused on enabling operational trust all the way from data to artificial intelligence. We recently launched what is called as a trusthouse.ai. It's all about like giving a complete trust and risk mitigation technology when you're operationalizing AI. We also released truststudio.ai. That basically allows enterprises to quickly build and operate multi-agentic AI to streamline business processes, regardless of the platform they choose, whichever cloud, whichever technology, whatever it is. So yeah, we are completely focused on trust in the sense that how do you actually build a trustworthy AI solution? How do you quickly operate a trustworthy AI solution? And how do you actually ensure that it is operating in the way it is supposed to operate while mitigating regulatory exposure, while mitigating existential threats?
Amazing.
That's brilliant. And to our audience, our listeners, if you're facing any challenges and you want those questions answered, we encourage you obviously drop those thoughts in the comment section. Also, comment trust if you want to engage with Chiru or Sam and get access to some of those resources and those exclusive announcements, as well as perhaps a demo.
Yeah, one last thing I want to add is, Sam keeps telling this to me that, what is the relationship between our HUSI and JSOC? And Sam, probably you could actually, address that.
Yeah. I memean, we basically partner with our HUSI to help like clients deliver production like grade AI. And so our HUSI, what they do is they help us bring the platform, the governance, policy, and then we bring security and operational discipline. So that's why Chiru and I are here together. Like we basically see the same side of the same problem. And so our HUSI is like the brain, and JSOC JSOC IT is the backbone. So, and you really need both.
Absolutely, and it's been fascinating stuff, gentlemen. It really has, and we'd like to say a huge thank you to both of you. I'm sure this is an episode that will be of major interest to a huge amount of our community. If people want to continue the discussion, as always, we invite you to join the Secure CyberConnect community. We offer a range of collaborative solutions across tech and security and AI professionals at no cost. And as always, expansive community access, mutual mentoring, online networking, and amazing interviews such as this, with panel discussions and masterclasses going forward. Huge thanks to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Warren.
Cheers. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, chaps.